The snow wasn't red when Harper first stepped into the clearing, but 20 feet in. She saw it, thin streaks of crimson in the white, like something bleeding into the memory of the forest. Then her eyes rose. A lion hung upside down between two trees, chained, silent, and beneath it, not a hunter, not a man, but a creature the world had dismissed as myth, standing still. One massive hand pressed to the rusted chain like he was holding the lion's pain in his own palm. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you. Please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Montana's Bitterroot Mountains had always been a place of silence, but today, the silence was sharp, the wind thick with snow, weaved between the pines like it was searching for something or someone. The sky was a low, iron gray, pregnant with more snowfall, and the cold snapped like glass beneath every boot step. Harper Collins, 38, trudged through knee-deep snow, her breath curling in front of her in short, determined puffs. She was tall, lean, and always dressed in olive canvas layers, her red hair braided tight beneath a fur-lined ranger hood. Harper had a stride like someone used to being alone in the wild. She had once served in the U.S. Forest Service in Arizona, but the loss of her younger brother Daniel, a wildfire fighter who perished in a sudden blaze, had driven her deep into the Montana wilderness years ago. The forest had taken someone from her, and yet, ironically, it had become the only place she could breathe again. Today, she was following up on a camera trap that had stopped transmitting 3 days earlier, routine, she thought, until she saw the blood. It started as small crimson beads dotting the snow, then a streak, then splatter. Harper slowed, instinct taking over. Her boots crunched in rhythm with her quickening pulse, and then she saw it. Suspended between two towering spruces was a white lion, a creature so out of place it looked sculpted by snow itself. But this was no statue. He was real, and he was suffering. His hind legs were caught in thick iron chains, hoisted upside down like a cruel trophy. Blood dripped from a deep wound around his thigh, each drop carving a red jewel into the snow below. His eyes, a haunting blue, were half-lidded with exhaustion. His mane, though matted and dirty, still carried the ghostly majesty of a creature born under the sun. Not in this frozen hell, but Harper wasn't the first to find him. Standing silently beneath the lion was a figure out of myth. Broad shoulders, covered in dark, weather-stained fur, massive hands resting loosely at its sides, its breath rising and long. Patient clouds, towering at nearly 8 feet. Bigfoot, or something the world would insist could not exist, was there. His fur was streaked with snow and time, a silvering black, and his face carried the worn solemnity of an old guardian. His eyes, however, were what rooted Harper to the ground. Sad, dark, and unmistakably aware. She dared not move at first. The stories, the blurry photos, the hoaxes, all of them flashed in her mind. But this wasn't a story. He was real, and he wasn't afraid. The creature looked up at the suspended lion, then back down, slowly raising one of his enormous hands. He did not try to break the chain. Instead, he simply placed a palm against the cold metal, as if to steady it, as if to share the weight, and the lion, impossibly, did not struggle. He only breathed, shallow, ragged, but alive. Harper slowly removed her glove and reached for the radio clipped to her belt. "This is Harper Collins at Grid 14 North. I need immediate response. We have a snared animal. It's a lion, a white lion, severely injured. Hanging, I repeat, hanging by chains. A pause, and I'm not alone. She didn't add the part about Bigfoot, not yet. Static crackled back. Copy that, Harper. Medical team en route, ETA 28 minutes. Stay with the animal. Over. Harper lowered the radio and looked back toward the creature. Ronan, she would later name him, after a forest knight from a Celtic legend she loved as a child. But now, he was just standing there, not moving, not growling, just keeping vigil beside a dying king. Snow began to fall harder, swirling around them like ash. Harper stepped closer now, slowly. Ronan did not flinch. His focus remained on the lion. "I don't know what you are," Harper whispered, "but I know what this is." The lion stirred. A twitch of his paw. Blood smeared the snow. Harper felt a cold dread rise up her spine. "We can't wait 28 minutes," she muttered. She reached for her field kit, pulling out a trauma blanket and a cutting tool, but the chains were too thick, too rusted. Not something she could handle alone. She looked back at Ronan. He hadn't moved. But then, something happened. The lion, barely conscious, opened his eyes, not toward Harper, but toward Ronan. Their eyes met, and Harper saw something in that glance that was not of this world. Recognition. She froze. "How do you know each other?" she murmured. The wind didn't answer, but Ronan did. He stepped back just slightly, as if making space, his great hand still resting on the chain. Not to pull, not to break, but to remind Snowfire. Yes, that was what she'd call him, that he wasn't alone. The moment hung there, heavy as the storm, a woman of science, a creature of myth, a dying lion, all of them tethered in one frozen breath of time. Then the wind shifted, and sirens howled in the distance. Rescue vehicles. The moment was breaking. Harper looked at Ronan one last time. "I'll take it from here," she said softly. But Ronan didn't move. By the time the rescue team reached Grid 14 North, the snowstorm had turned brutal. Thick flakes whirled in every direction, swallowing sound and distance alike. A medic truck parked crookedly at the tree line, and 3 figures bundled in tan winter gear stepped into the clearing with urgency. Dr. May Fletcher, the lead veterinarian, was the first to reach Harper in her early 50s. Dr. Fletcher had a square jaw, short silver hair, and the no-nonsense air of a woman who had delivered foals in floods and stitched bears under moonlight. Her breath came fast, not from exertion, but from concern. "Where's the injury?" Harper simply pointed upward. Dr. Fletcher followed her gaze and froze. Her gloved hand rose slowly, as if to shield her from the enormity of what she saw. That's a white lion, Snowfire," Harper said quietly. "That's what I'm calling him." The vet didn't ask why. She stepped forward, barking orders to her 2 assistants, Toby and Lena, both young, both efficient, but neither prepared for what they were witnessing. Toby was wiry, 24, with a nervous energy and a heavy camera always slung across his shoulder. Lena, calm and deliberate, had hazel eyes and a cleft chin, a soft-spoken transplant from Seattle who had abandoned city life for the wilderness after a messy divorce. As they unpacked the bolt cutters, tranquilizer kits, and gauze rolls, Harper backed away slowly. Ronan had not moved. The massive creature now sat beneath the trees, legs folded like a monk, eyes locked on Snowfire. He made no sound, no motion, but there was something unmistakable in his stillness, a presence that filled the entire glade. He wasn't watching the humans, he was watching the lion. And something in his gaze made even Dr. Fletcher hesitate. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. Harper answered without looking at her. "He found Snowfire before I did. And he hasn't left. Not for a second. They worked quickly. Toby fired the tranquilizer into the lion's shoulder. His body jerked once, then fell still. Lena and Dr. Fletcher moved beneath the suspended weight, assessing the damage. The chains had cut deep. Blood mixed with snow into a slush the color of rust. Fletcher muttered as she pressed on the wounds. This wasn't just a trap. This was meant to kill slowly. Hours, maybe a day more, and we'd be recovering a carcass. Ronan exhaled heavily. The sound made Toby flinch. Harper moved beside the great beast. She didn't reach out, just stood near. "You knew," she said softly. "Somehow, you knew," as they worked on cutting the chains. Ronan's gaze followed every movement, and when the final length of rusted iron fell to the snow with a hard thud, he stood, not to leave, not to threaten, just to rise and watch as they lowered Snowfire to the ground. The stretcher took all three humans to maneuver. Ronan did not interfere, but he stepped beside the edge of the clearing as if escorting them. As they moved through the storm toward the truck, the lion's massive body swaddled in layers of thermal blankets. No one dared shoo Ronan away. He stopped only when the doors shut. Then, slowly, he returned to the tree line, just far enough to disappear, but close enough to still be near. 20 miles east of Bitterroot, in a small wood-framed house painted blue-gray with a rusted tin roof, Caleb Reed, age 10, sat hunched over a large sketch pad. His fingers moved with manic precision, dragging colored pencils in long, sharp strokes: snow, trees, blood, a lion, a giant with dark fur and long arms. His mother, Eleanor, watched from the doorway, a part-time nurse and full-time caretaker. Eleanor was in her late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a heart-shaped face that had learned to hide exhaustion behind practiced smiles. Her son had not spoken a word in 3 years, not since the drowning accident that took his father and nearly took him. 2, the trauma had left no visible scar, but it had stolen his voice and replaced it with silence filled only by pencils and drawings. Today was different. Eleanor moved closer, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. "What are you drawing?" Baby Caleb did not look up. He darkened the snow under the lion's body with red, then, with surprising delicacy, he began sketching the hand of the giant creature, palm open, resting gently against the lion's chain. Then he spoke. "He's real," Caleb said, voice small, cracked with dust. "He saved the lion." Eleanor dropped the cloth. "What did you say?" Caleb looked up. His eyes, soft brown, always so distant, were focused and clear. "He's real." He repeated, "He saved the lion." Tears filled her eyes instantly. She dropped to her knees and hugged him. But Caleb didn't hug back. He simply stared at his drawing. He wasn't remembering. He was witnessing. And Eleanor, for the first time, felt something tremble beneath her understanding, something old, something waking. Back at the field station, Dr. Fletcher and Harper watched over Snowfire in a temporary enclosure lined with thermal pads and canvas walls. The lion's vitals were steady but weak. The wounds were cleaned, the bandages tight. He would live, but just barely. Harper stepped outside for air and stopped short. Ronan was there, sitting cross-legged at the tree line again, barely visible in the snow. Watching. Still loyal. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The wind died down around them. The forest held its breath. And beside the White King, the Wild One kept watch. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the Bitterroot sanctuary coated in a brilliant layer of snow that shimmered like crushed glass. Sunlight filtered weakly through the bare pine branches, and a hush lingered over the compound like the echo of something sacred. It was as if nature itself had paused, watching. inside the medical enclosure. A snowfire lay on his side atop a thick bed of straw and insulated mats, his flank rising and falling with each labored breath. His bandaged leg was elevated, the wound flushed and red beneath layers of gauze. A heater hummed low nearby. Dr. May Fletcher sat beside him, logging notes on a clipboard, her eyes weary but sharp. Snowfire stirred slightly as the door to the outer fence clicked open. Ronan was there. The massive creature stood outside the perimeter, not inside the gates, not challenging the humans, but sitting just beyond the chain-link fence. His breath fogged the metal wires. His presence had become a constant, like the trees or the snow. No one had told him to leave. He hadn't tried to enter, either. He simply watched. Harper Collins stood several yards behind him, leaning on a railing, arms crossed over her jacket. Her eyes didn't leave him. Since the night of the rescue, she'd been trying to explain what logic could not contain. There was no record, no precedent, no field guide entry for what Ronan was doing. She'd written daily reports and deleted every one. Snowfire only calmed when Ronan was near. The lion had thrashed wildly during his first few hours inside until Harper had noticed something. Ronan had vanished briefly that night, returning at dawn. When he did, the lion stilled. Since then, it had become a ritual. Ronan arrived. Snowfire slept. Even now, as Ronan sat quietly, Snowfire let out a breath that was almost contented behind the medical trailer. The forest opened into a winding snowpath that led down toward the outer fence. There, walking with small, careful steps, was Caleb Reed. The boy was bundled in a navy coat several sizes too large, the sleeves covering his hands. His boots made soft crunches in the snow. Slung over his shoulder was a worn leather satchel filled with notebooks and drawing pads. He had slipped away from his mother again. She wouldn't find him missing until noon. Maybe longer. Caleb knew these woods well. They whispered to him like old friends. He followed the sounds in his mind, the same image that had haunted him each night since he'd spoken again. The giant, the lion, the chain. He didn't know why, but he knew they were real. As he neared the sanctuary's edge, he paused at a thick patch of snow-covered brush. From there, he could see the fencing, the buildings, and the figure. Ronan. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply crouched and watched, and Ronan turned his head. The creature did not snarl. He did not rise, but his dark eyes locked with the boy's across the distance. There was no fear, just a quiet, slow acknowledgement. Caleb stepped out of the trees and into the open. Ronan didn't move. The boy walked until the fence stood between them, and for a long time, they did nothing but look. Harper, alerted by the movement, approached slowly. When she saw the child, her mouth opened to call out, but then she stopped. Caleb raised his hand to the fence and placed it gently against the cold wire. Ronan mirrored the gesture. No sound, no language, just two beings, both alone in their own ways, recognizing something broken yet whole in each other. Then Caleb did something else. He whispered, "Thank you." Harper's breath caught. She had heard that voice once before, from a radio call in the storm, but never in person. She stepped forward carefully. Caleb. The boy didn't turn. He simply kept his hand against the fence. He saved the lion. Caleb said, "I saw it." Harper crouched beside him. "You dreamed it." "No," Caleb said. "I drew it before it happened." Harper's gaze shifted from the boy to the creature on the other side of the fence. Her heart thudded deep in her chest. There were things science couldn't hold, things language failed, but the forest knew, suddenly. Another figure approached from the south trail, Eleanor Reed, Caleb's mother. Breathless and flushed with panic, she wore gray hiking boots, a long scarf, and panic behind her eyes. A nurse by profession, she had the bearing of someone used to acting calm under pressure. But now, her voice cracked. "Caleb, sweetheart, you can't run off like that." She froze when she saw Ronan. Harper rose to meet her. "It's okay." "No, it's not," Eleanor said, hands trembling. "That thing." Harper shook her head. "He's not a thing. He hasn't hurt anyone." Eleanor moved forward and knelt, pulling Caleb gently into her arms. The boy let himself be held, but his eyes never left Ronan. The creature stayed where he was, silent and unmoving. Then Caleb turned to his mother and, softly, said, "He didn't let him die." The words broke her. She looked up at Harper, voice hoarse. "He's been silent for years, and now he's telling me about that." Harper didn't have answers, but she placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder and simply said, "Some healing doesn't start with words." That night, as the stars bloomed above the Bitterroot Range and the wind whispered through the black trees, Snowfire stirred inside his shelter. He lifted his head and beyond the fencing. Ronan was still there, sitting like stone, but for the first time. Snowfire gave a sound, not a growl, not a roar, but a low, soft chuff of breath. It was recognition. The wind howled again that night, as if the forest itself had remembered something it wanted to forget. Snow clung to the pine branches like frozen lace, and the moon cast its cold light over Bitterroot Sanctuary, turning the metal fencing into silver bones. Inside the enclosure, Snowfire stirred uneasily. He had been healing, slowly. Yes, but with strength returning day by day. His leg was still stiff, his body still scarred. But there was a pulse in him now that hadn't been there when they first brought him in. A sense of awareness, of watching. And tonight, something wasn't right. He stood with effort, pressing his weight against the uninjured legs, his eyes fixed on the forest's edge beyond the outer fence. His ears twitched. His breath came faster. He growled. Then he roared, deep, guttural, wounded, but loud enough to wake the bones of the mountain. Harper Collins was asleep in the small cabin just down the trail from the sanctuary's gate. She sat bolt upright at the sound, instinct moving before thought. She threw on her coat, grabbed the flashlight and the tranquilizer gun she now kept at the door. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she ran. At the same moment, another figure was stirring across the property. Caleb. The boy had returned earlier that day to drop off a drawing, a gift for Ronan, of him and Snowfire sitting beneath stars. He had tucked it into the fence, believing maybe the wild one would understand pictures better than words. But now, something pulled him from sleep. Some sound, primal, low, like the earth groaning. He got up quietly, slipped out the front door while Eleanor slept. He followed the sound through the trees, barefoot inside his rubber boots, coat zipped to the chin. His drawings spilled from the satchel as he walked, but he didn't stop to pick them up. At the sanctuary's outer fence, Snowfire's silhouette was visible through the flurries, pacing, tail flicking, and something moved beyond the trees. A voice whispered in the dark. Another hissed. Caleb crouched. Through the snowfall emerged two men, cloaked in heavy, mismatched hunting gear. One wore a camo jacket smeared with mud and blood, a thick beard jutting out beneath a faded cap. He carried a rifle slung low, finger twitching near the trigger. The other, slimmer, twitchy, balding with a scar across his cheek, held a machete. Their eyes scanned the enclosures like they belonged here, like they owned the woods. They did not see Caleb at first, but he saw them. The boy's breath caught. His hand instinctively went to the fence. Snowfire growled again, louder. The bearded man raised his rifle. We finished what we started, but before he could aim, a shadow moved, not from the trees, from above. It landed with a crack of snow and silence. Ronan, the creature had leapt from a low tree like a mountain dropped from the sky. He did not roar. He did not speak. He moved. The rifle fired once. Twice. One bullet shattered through a tree trunk. The second struck Ronan's shoulder. But the giant didn't falter. He thundered forward, his long arms swinging like storm-tossed limbs. The poachers turned to run. From the east side of the forest. Another shape charged, then another. 2 more Bigfoots. Smaller than Ronan, but no less powerful, their fur darker, their strides smoother. One had a streak of silver across its back like an old scar. The other, a narrow face and longer arms. They were his kin. Caleb stood frozen as the 3 of them flanked the poachers, corralling them like wolves. The men tripped, cursed. One dropped his weapon. The machete clattered onto a stone. Then a noise broke through the storm. A snarl. Snowfire. The lion had broken through the weakened gate of his enclosure, dragging his injured leg, but standing proud, he stepped into the snow. Mane tangled in the wind, eyes fixed on the threat. He didn't charge. He stood, tall, regal, a king reborn. The poachers stumbled backward, their bravado gone, their breath ragged. They fled into the forest, chased by the growl of the lion, the shadows of the Bigfoots, and the rage of a storm, and through it all, Caleb remained, his hand still pressed against the fence, his eyes wide, not with fear, but with wonder. Harper arrived seconds later, out of breath, weapon drawn. She saw the broken gate, she saw Caleb, she saw Snowfire, free, standing beside Ronan, the 2 giants of flesh and fur, creatures who should not have been allies. But there they were. Ronan turned to face her. Blood dripped from his shoulder, but his eyes were calm. She lowered her weapon behind her. The other staff began to arrive. Dr. Fletcher, Toby, Lena. Confusion spread among them like sparks on dry pine, but no one fired, no one spoke, because they understood. Snowfire limped forward and brushed his head, not against Ronan, but against Caleb. The boy froze, eyes glassy. Then he raised one small hand and placed it atop the lion's mane. There, beneath the cold light of the stars, a child, a lion, and a legend stood as one. The video leaked 2 days later. No one at Bitterroot Sanctuary knew exactly who had uploaded it. Some suspected Toby the Young, jittery assistant with a habit of recording everything, just in case. Others thought it might have been one of the back-end security contractors who maintained the camera feeds, but whoever did it, the world now knew. The grainy. Night vision footage showed a massive humanoid figure, Ronan charging from the trees to intercept armed poachers. Behind him, a white lion limped into the clearing, standing proud despite a bloodied leg. Moments later, a child, Caleb, emerged from the shadows, and then stillness, recognition, a moment between predator, legend, and child that transcended instinct or biology. It went viral before dawn. Headlines blazed. Myth saves man and beast. Sasquatch protects white lion and child from hunters. Is this the proof humanity needs by noon? The sanctuary's outer perimeter was blocked by journalists, activists, skeptics, and scientists, satellite trucks, drones, and live streamers camped just beyond the tree line. They shouted Harper's name from behind metal barricades, desperate for a statement. She gave none. Harper Collins stood inside the cabin office, arms folded, dark circles under her eyes. She'd been working nonstop, coordinating ranger patrols, managing emergency protocols, fielding calls from government wildlife departments and biologists from as far as Oxford. But she refused every interview. She deleted email after email. She didn't care for fame. She cared for Ronan, and for Snowfire, and for the silence they'd earned. Dr. May Fletcher entered the cabin, setting down a mug of coffee. "You're going to burn out," she said, her voice a quiet rasp. She wore her usual khaki vest over a long thermal shirt, and her white-gray hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. "They won't stop calling." "I don't care," Harper said without looking up. "The state's sending someone," Fletcher added. "A legal liaison to assess liability." Harper finally met her gaze. "They want to put them in cages." "Don't they?" Fletcher didn't answer, but the look on her face said enough. Later that afternoon, the liaison arrived. Dean Whitmore, mid-40s, short-cropped hair, clean-shaven, all angles and government posture. He wore a navy wool coat and brown leather gloves, and spoke in clipped sentences like a man who read contracts for breakfast. "Miss Collins, I'm here to ensure that Bitterroot Sanctuary remains compliant with federal wildlife regulations and that." "Cut the tape," Harper said. Dean blinked. "I'm not letting you take them." She added, "Neither one." Dean opened a manila folder, sighing. "You understand the implications of what your team has recorded. Interspecies interaction, possibly sentient behavior. A mythological creature that just rescued a federally protected lion and a minor child. This is not a decision you get to make alone." "I already did," Harper said. "And I have a proposal." The silence stretched. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside, blueprints, topographic maps, and a title that read, "Hybrid Protection Zone Proposal, Bitterroot Reserve Extension." The idea was simple, revolutionary, and completely insane, instead of relocating Ronan or trying to trap Snowfire. Harper proposed expanding the sanctuary, creating an enclosed but natural section of forest at the edge of the property where both could roam freely. Limited monitoring, no tours, no outside access, just a place where nature's most improbable alliance could exist without interference. Caleb's drawings were included in the packet, scanned, annotated, and organized. Ronan beneath starlight, Snowfire brushing against the boy's shoulder. Dozens of images, soft and childlike, but emotionally raw. Dean read it all, twice, and he didn't laugh. Instead, he closed the file and said, "I'll bring it to the board." 3 weeks later, the gates opened. Only a few people were present. Harper, Dr. Fletcher, Caleb and Eleanor, Toby and Lena. No cameras, no press, no audience, just a sliver of morning sunlight melting the frost from the grass. The hybrid zone was roughly 20 acres, with a natural stream running through it and rock outcroppings perfect for shade and rest. Small shelters had been hidden within the terrain for veterinary access, but otherwise, it was untouched wilderness. Snowfire stood near the inner gate, healed but changed. His leg bore a thick scar, and his gait still carried a slight limp. But he looked strong, tall, noble. Ronan waited across the field beneath a cedar tree, his silhouette like an old sentinel. He had arrived hours earlier. No one had called him. He simply knew. Harper stepped back from the gate controls. The latch released with a soft click. Snowfire did not rush forward. He stepped, slowly, paws soft against the damp earth. He crossed into the open with the quiet assurance of something returning, not being released. When he reached Ronan, there was no fanfare, no roar, no spectacle. Ronan lifted one massive hand and placed it gently on Snowfire's mane. It wasn't dominance, it was gratitude, Caleb. Watching from beside the fence, pressed a new drawing into his mother's hands. She opened it. It showed a lion and a giant walking side by side, disappearing into a forest of stars. Sometimes, miracles do not come with thunder or lightning. Sometimes, they arrive in silence through the touch of a lion's head, the stillness of a mythical guardian, or the first word from a child who hadn't spoken in years. This story reminds us that compassion knows no boundaries, and that even the wildest among us are capable of love, protection, and healing. Maybe Ronan wasn't just a creature of legend. Maybe he was a messenger sent by God to protect, to guide, and to remind us that hope still walks quietly in the shadows of this world, in a time when we often lose faith in humanity. This tale invites us to look deeper, to believe again, and to cherish the silent connections that speak louder than words. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists. Leave a comment below and write Amen if you believe that God still works through unexpected miracles. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and join us for more stories of wonder, healing, and faith. And may God bless you and those you love, always.